Welcome to season 2 of Be Nice and Roll Dice. And today we're going to be talking about how to deal with that guy at the table.
My name is Tanya, otherwise known as the War Mistress. I've painted some minis, I've played some games, and I'm on a mission to be nice and roll dice.
We're back for another episode of Be Nice and Roll Dice, and I'm here with one of the nicest guys in Warhammer 40k, Stephen Box. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, that is a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. That's a pleasure.
It's true. You are like literally one of the nicest dudes. And I'm so excited to be talking today about dealing with unsporting behavior at the table, because it's not something I've had to deal with, but it is it's like tools for my toolkit that I would like to have just in case that it happens. So in case people don't know who you are and what it is that you do, maybe you could explain to our listeners what it is that you do.
So what do I do in the Warhammer community is I have a YouTube channel called Vanguard Tactics, and we specialize in competitive 40k, but we like to think ourselves as a bit of a new breed of Warhammer player. So with us, it's all about playing with fair play, intent, sportsmanship, and just making sure that we have balanced and fun games. So that's kind of what our YouTube thing or direction is that we try to take. But my main thing that I do and spend most of my days doing is teaching Warhammer 40k to players that really want to understand a little bit more about the game, gain a little bit of confidence, get some clarity on where they're at, how to progress, and ultimately spend a lot of time in my community of Vanguard Tactics Academy. And that's where I am making my lessons and my modules to help sort of grow and nurture them as players so that we can just become better together, really. So that's me. That's what I do.
Excellent. I'm not one of your coaching customers. I feel like I'm a coaching client of almost everybody else, so I almost feel like I should dip into you as well. But I have noticed that in almost all of the coaching services, there is this sort of overarching idea that most of the coaches want to bring. They want to bring sportsmanship into the coaching process as well. And I think for a really long time, competitive Warhammer players maybe had a really bad reputation for unsporting behavior. But I do see a lot of the good work that you and the other coaches in the sort of industry are doing. Was this just always something that like was good sportsmanship always something that was like close to your heart, or is this something that you've sort of put into the program due to past events that you've sort of experienced at the table?
It's a good question. I think my background is elite level sport. So when I was younger, I represented my country for volleyball. I was part of the Great British Development Program when I was at university. I've played high level hockey. That's field hockey, not ice hockey. And then for the last 10 years, no, not that long, I've been coaching nutrition and fitness for 10 years, but I've been a competitive in, I would say, world-class bodybuilder for the last 6 years, with the exception of the last 2. But prior to that, yeah. So for me, my whole life has been about sport. It's been about, how can you be better today than you were yesterday? And the only person you should compare yourself against is yourself. So for me, it's all about that self-improvement, evolving, and sportsmanship and fair play goes hand in hand with those things. And when I joined the 40k community and playing competitively, I found that potentially some of the people didn't share my same values when I got to the table. For them, it was about winning rather than trying to essentially win the game. I don't mind if you want to win the game because you're trying to beat the mission, and I am trying to do exactly the same thing. We just have an interaction because your goal and my goal are the same, but it doesn't mean that you're trying to beat me. Does that make sense? You're trying to beat the mission, and I'm trying to do that too. And it's just whoever achieves that in a faster, more efficient, or better way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some people really didn't share that same mindset for me. So I was like, I've got a very sort of sporting background. I'm very much used to things happening on the field at hockey, but, you know, things are penalized. There's a structure. You shake your opponent's hand at the end. You have a good laugh. And that's what it's all about. There's no judgment. There's no like negativity. It's not toxic. You know, there's none of that. It's just fantastic. But ultimately, you're all playing. You play to win, but you play hard. But you play, you know, sort of firm but fair is kind of how I like to play.
So it's like this idea that maybe unsporting behavior is rooted in something outside of the game itself.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. All right. I never even really thought about it like that, but yeah, I guess you're not actually playing your opponent in a way. You're winning the battle, essentially. That's actually a really good
like at
way
the
of
end of the
putting
day,
it. Yeah.
the primary mission doesn't state in the grand tournament pack. It doesn't state you need to annihilate your opponent. That is not the game. The mission says for the primary, you score 45 points for holding, you know, one or two objectives and holding more than your opponent. And then you've got to pick some secondaries, which is I'm going to scramble over here, scramble over there. I'm going to put some banners up. I'm going to be in this table quarter. That doesn't say anything about I need to table my opponent. I need to beat that person across the table from me. No, all I'm trying to do is score as many points as I can out of 100. And you're trying to do the same thing. And it's just whoever does that in a slightly better way is going to win that mission so that we can go through to the next round in whatever placing that, you know, the tournament feels like we should go down that route. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I want my opponent to bring their very, very best against me. So it means for me, I can really think, oh, Tanya, you've kind of really put me in a spot here. I need to sit and think about this one. This is a puzzle. I'm a puzzle solver. I play this game because I like puzzles. And my opponent, the better that they can play, the harder the puzzle they bring me, the more rewarding I'm going to find it when I can unlock that puzzle, when I can solve it, when I can come up with a solution to the problem that you're causing me. But what I'm not trying to do is beat you. That's a completely like, I don't know. It's just a different mindset that I like to adopt. Like I love escape rooms for that same reason. I want to do the hardest escape rooms because I want to know that I managed to unlock every single thing. I managed to solve every puzzle in the fastest time I possibly could.
I think I don't know if with me it's unsporting behavior, but I put an awful lot of pressure on myself to like prove to all the haters out there that I can actually play this game. But I think thinking about it in terms like that, like I'm not playing my opponent, but I'm playing the actual mission. I think that actually might help me moving forward in a big way. So thank you for that light bulb moment, Stephen.
Well, no, honestly, like it's I think I recently did a poll on my YouTube channel, and I said, how many of you actually know where you're at in the game, in terms of your skill level, and have a clear road to improve? And I think the stats were something like 60 to 70% of people had no idea on their ability, and they had no idea on how to actually improve at the game. And then I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask my academy students to see if they know any different, because I think, well, I need to test the actual product that I'm coaching. And one of the way that I help people understand their current skill level is by identifying how well they're doing at the missions, and then look at that as your route of progress. So if in your first game against, I don't know, there's different parameters. So each of the 9 individual missions changes, right? So you can't compare retrieval to, for example, surround and destroy, whatever, right? Because they're different. And you can't necessarily compare playing Necrons versus AdMech. But what you can start to do is look at trends. So you can start to see averagely how many points you're scoring, averagely how many secondary points you're scoring. You know, can you consistently score 70 points in a battle? You know, that could be like a marker. And then maybe once you've hit that, you can go, cool, yeah, I can do that 8 out of 10 times. How do I push up to averagely scoring 80 points every mission? And if you can look at that as your road to progression, you understand that actually it's okay if I'm only getting 20 points in the first few times I first play. But then how do I get into the 30s? How do I get into the 40s, into the 50s? What is it next that I need to look at? Is it the primary? Am I not holding them very well? I'm not scoring secondaries particularly great. And then you can slowly unlock each of these things and then gradually take you that one step closer to getting to the point where you go, yeah, 8 out of 10 times I scored 90 points. And that should, that will end up leading to winning more games than you're losing, but you're not focusing on the outcome, you're focusing on the journey. And that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm in mentality coaching with Scary. So we're sort of like breaking down my puzzle. So my path to success is like, yes, we do track my games and I do track a lot of data. But we're not at the point yet where we can really look at that because my mentality needs to change before I can get the maximum out of all of that data. So that's my path to success, is like unlocking the mental game first. But once that's unlocked, I am going to have a lot of data that I can then go to probably rapidly unlock that next part. But this is a little bit off topic here. um,
That's okay.
so
It's good to cover.
yeah. And I mean, I'm pretty open with my struggles, especially my mentality struggles around this game, in the hopes that maybe somebody out there who is also struggling, might be able to learn something along the way with me, or at least see
Yeah,
that it's
absolutely.
okay to struggle as long as you're creating a framework for which you can overcome it.
Yeah. I think it's only natural to. Like, the reason why I set up my coaching academy and the lessons that I put in place was because when I got into the hobby, that was the exact thing I wanted, because just playing games and just watching battle reports was not helping me improve. There was nothing else like it. There was nothing structured where I could start here, watch the next lesson. Okay, I'm a very sort of systematic person where I need to go A to B to C to D, because that's how I've learned for absolutely everything else. So it's completely cool to struggle. The game is incredibly overwhelming. I think there's probably a million different combinations through stratagems, abilities, warlord traits, unit profiles. It's nuts. So if you're not struggling with this game, you've probably got more of a problem than if you aren't struggling, because I struggle all the time. I struggle with things, and it's cool to share that.
I have this mentality, because you do sometimes hear people be like, "Oh, I beat everybody in my friend group," and my immediate thought is, you need to go play somebody better than you, because there's
Yeah,
always somebody better than you, right?
always. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when this person who's like beaten everybody in their friend group a million times and just can't lose, when they find that person who's better than them, they're not expecting it at all, right? They don't have the
No,
tools to deal with it because they've not trained for it.
absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe then, if they find that person and they have that expectation, or they have an expectation and it's crushed, that might lead to unsporting behavior, right?
That could definitely be a trigger. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few others as well we could
Yeah.
probably talk about.
Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes I think maybe newer players may not be able to identify what technically is unsporting behavior at the table, though.
Okay. So do you want me to go over my little clarification that I've got?
Yes, please.
Okay. So think of this. So obviously I've been helping people with their diets, nutrition, training for a long time, and I see a lot of crossovers. Okay. You've heard of cheating on your diet? You
Mm-hmm.
heard of that phrase before? I cheated on my diet, right? So when we come to psychology of looking at why do people self-sabotage when it comes to their diets, what we have is something called adherence, where you are adhering to the plan that you've been set. So in our case, we adhering to the rules of the game? And then you have non-adherence. And this is where you are not adhering to the rules, or you're not adhering to the diet. Okay. If I say to my clients, have 2,000 calories a day, and they eat 2,200 calories, they are not adhering to the plan. Okay. Now, you then have intentional, and then you have not intentional. So, for example, I can intentionally stick to my program. So, cool. I'm making the cognitive decision to stick to the plan. And that's cool. I can also intentionally not adhere to the rules. So I know that this is the right rule, However, I'm going to intentionally ignore that and make up this other rule because it benefits me at the table. But this is where it gets then that's clear, that's cheating, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're clearly doing this intentional thing to gain an unfair advantage. And I think that's also important. Is this person gaining an unfair advantage at the table? Because the other really interesting thing is what happens when somebody unintentionally, so they didn't mean to, not adhere to the rules. And I think that is something which is this grey area which gets confused with intentionally breaking the rules. Because at what point did I accidentally do this one thing? And let's think about all the rules out there. And I would probably say, if you're new to the game and you're thinking, oh, should I go to a tournament? You know, I've heard about this unsportsmanlike conduct and people cheating. I would say 80% of the time, we are, well, actually, I'd probably say 70% of the time, we are intentionally adhering to the rules. And if you think about the population, it's probably about 70 people intentionally adhere to the rules. And then you've got the other 25% of the time that we will, when we're playing, unintentionally not adhere to the rules. So we'll accidentally cheat, basically. And then you've got that very, very small percentage of people that will intentionally break a rule. And it is a very small minority. And hopefully today, if you can sort of take something away from this, chat that we're having, is number one, how do I identify when is somebody intentionally breaking the rules versus accidentally? And then how do we rectify that situation so that they cannot gain an unfair advantage? Because as long as there's not an unfair advantage, we can still play the game. It can still be enjoyable. Somebody can foul me in hockey. That's fine. As long as that, they didn't intentionally do it. And if they did, then there was a repercussion for their action, which meant that now they're no longer gaining an unfair advantage. So they tackle me in a dirty way. They get a red card. They're sent off. Their team's a player down. We now score 2 extra goals because they're a player down. We're a player up. And we've got a penalty. So it's very easy to clarify some of those things. Whereas in the past, that hasn't happened with Warhammer, which I think has created a bit of a feel bad moment where this person did this, they got away with it. There was no repercussions for that individual. So I think that's where this sort of toxic witch hunting behavior can come from sometimes. But, I'm sure we've all been there where, just to sort of touch on this kind of this grey area of this unintentional non-adherence to the rules. So, for example, we all get excited, right? We all get excited when we play. We all want to make those charges. We want to move as far as we can. We want to shoot all the guns we've got. Like, it's a battle game. Like, we want to do those cool things.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see my solitaire go in and absolutely wreck someone. I think that's going to be quality to see on the table. I want my favorite character that I've just spent ages painting to make his charge. I want that to happen. I don't want him to roll a double one and sit there and do nothing and get shot off the table, because I'm invested in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we all do it. We all get a little bit carried away. We can all accidentally get addition bleed. What was a rule in the previous codex might not be a rule in this codex. And sometimes you might accidentally use the old one than what you're using now. And that's cool. That happens all the time. And we just need to be very, I think, forgiving up to a point. And there's loads of strategies that we can put in place to help you make sure that, you are going to stay on top of things. So one of the things people say to me, or I've had recently when I've gone to an event, oh, Steve, I'm really glad I'm playing you because I know you're not going to cheat. And my response is, no, watch me because I will. I won't intentionally cheat to gain an unfair advantage, but I'm going to accidentally cheat at points. But I want you to be comfortable to say, hey, Steve, you're getting a bit excited there, mate. Like, you've maybe moved a little bit too far or whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
You piled in that little bit too extra. Just make sure, Steve, you're, consolidating closest to that closest enemy model because this guy's behind that wall. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even see that guy. Okay, yeah, cool, sure. Yeah, I'll take that back. No problem. Thanks for reminding me that he's there. Or you can't deep strike here, Steve, because there's a guy hidden behind this or whatever. Oh, yeah, good spot. Thank you very much. And I think the game isn't just black and white. It's it's a gray area. It's all about communication, right?
I always say
But
that
if
the
you
game
know that,
is it's like a cooperative experience. Like yes, we're trying to win the mission, as you say, but you can only do that with the help of the other person across the table.
yeah, absolutely. And when you, I find it when I get to the table and I meet someone, and we're just sharing that same mindset, we're going to have an awesome game. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And I'm going to say, don't go there, because if you do that, this is going to happen. Or I've had it in the past where I've said, do you know, I've got this stratagem called Ospec Scan, because I don't want you to feel like if you drop there, I'm going to, take you off the table. I don't want those moments in the game to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes stratagems are in the locker just so that you have the ability to defend yourself in those certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, when you're playing a new player, you've got to be very open and, remind people of things. But yeah, it's all about, like you said, communication. It's all about understanding what are you trying to achieve here. And I think this would be one thing that we could certainly look at is what do you do when you meet that player? So imagine you and me, Tanya, you've just seen on BCP, you've paired against me, okay? And you've got no clue who I am. You just rock up to the table like Steve, he's playing, I don't know, AdMech. Cool. So we get to the table. You don't know who I am. What's the first thing you say to me? Hello, how you doing? But then after that, what do you start to say to me?
What do I start to say to you?
Yeah. What do you think would be a good conversation to have before we play the game?
After greetings, I usually like to sort of like look at the table and look at the mission and sort of go over like what is this terrain gonna do? Like what keywords are we giving it? I will go over what my army does. I'll start asking questions about your army, and it's a big long conversation. Long. It's like 5 minutes. Whatever you
Yeah.
need to get through it. Yeah.
But like one of the first questions I'll ask you is, how do you like to play?
Oh. See, for me at a tournament, I would assume that like people want a tight game. Um and we want to see who the best general is, but I
And
guess
what do you mean
they're
by a tight game?
a tight game like rules as written, essentially, not rules
Okay.
as intended. Um
Okay.
I would
Because I would say,
expect people to hold me accountable to the rules as written as well.
okay.
Yeah. Why?
So
What would you say?
I don't necessarily play exactly rules is written. I would prefer to play by intention of the rules. So
Interesting.
for example, let's say we have a situation where there's a building which is 4.5 inches high, okay, between the base floor and the floor,
Okay.
and you're running your, I don't know, let's say a Drakari Raider,
Okay.
and it's on you've decided to put it on an inch stem, not half an inch stem, an inch stem. So now that Raider is 5.5 inches from the floor. And you've done that in a way by placing it up on there that I cannot charge you, rules is written, and have engagement range through 5 inches because your hull, which is an inch above where your base is, and your base is 4.5 inches above the floor, I cannot charge you. So rules is written, I can't charge you, but it's pretty obvious I should be able to charge you if your base is there, right? So we now have a
Right.
moment in the game where rules is written is breaking this weird, like, okay, so you've got this raider that I can't just interact with now.
But
See what
like,
I'm trying to say?
is this base the standard base that comes with?
You could put it on a half an inch stand, you could put it on an inch stand, yeah, whatever. It's like completely up to your preference, right?
I suppose so.
Because rules is written, I could drop down, over.
So you would go through in that case, measure the base, measure all of the terrain on the table before the game even starts, or would this be something that you'd have to deal with in the middle of the game?
Well, rules is written. You'd have to deal with it as you went through the game. But rules is intended. I'd be like, mate, just charge me. I don't care. you see what I'm trying to say? So I think we've got to have this a bit of like, for me, that'll be a gotcha hammer moment. If I'm like, oh, I'm going to put my raider up on here so you can't charge me, Tanya, ha ha ha, with those ball grin. And you're like, well, great. So my army just sits there and does nothing for a turn. I'm like, yes, well, you said rules is written. But I'm a bit more like, okay, the rules is written in the game is going to shape the game. But then you and I need to come to that understanding that I don't want to claim an unfair advantage because a rule might be worded in a biased way towards me versus towards you. I would feel like you're going to have an unfair you're going to have a disadvantage in that situation. So I would be personally like, look, just charge me. I don't care that my base is half an inch off that thing. Just charge me. Let's get in. Let's get involved. Let's get in amongst it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I mean, I wouldn't. Okay, first off, I'm not looking for those kind of like rules interactions for those moments. To me, like, I don't want to win the game that way, right? I want to win the game because I moved better, I positioned better, I had better target priority. That's how I want to win the game. In general,
rules is written.
Like, but
on,
for me personally, in general, like if somebody did do that, I would probably just accept it. If somebody did that to me, I would be like, I guess, like you want to win that badly that you will model for advantage, possibly. Yeah, I'd probably just accept it. You're saying that I shouldn't accept it and I should question them on it?
No. So I think, again, it comes back to that initial conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that you're clearly not trying to gain an unfair advantage by wanting to play tight, rules is written.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is where the interesting part comes, because if you said to me, Steve, I want to play exactly to the letter of the rules and exactly how it can play, I need to respect that as a player.
Mm-hmm.
However, that may cause some situations for my opponent if the rules is written they don't happen to like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for example, yes, you might end up in this situation where that one turn I couldn't make that charge against you. Let's say you're the Drakari player using the Raider in this example. So yeah, okay, I can't charge you this one time, but next time I wrap your Raider and I destroy your Raider, and now you have to disembark, and you try and disembark within 3 horizontally, I'm going to actually now tell you, unfortunately, rules is written, you now have to measure from the hull of your base. And now you need to measure in a diagonal down, which means I've now been able to wrap up your entire Raider and all of the contents inside have died. Whereas potentially if we had been a bit more like, yeah, just getting in charge, and I'll be like, yeah, just disembark, it's fine, just measure it as we feel like the game should play, like a little bit more fluid, a little bit more, what's the word? Kind of immersive. That's how I would like to play. So again,
is that how you would word it in like pregame talk? I want to have an immersive experience, or like how would you word it so that there's no
ambiguity?
Yeah,
it's tough, and this is one of those things that you think how many rules are in the game, and sometimes these things will slip through the net, and sometimes they'll get picked up as an FAQ or as a a change or whatever it might be. But I think sometimes I would just say to you at the start, hey Tanya, how do you want to play? I love to play in a game where the best general wins, like you said to me. And I just want to make sure neither of us ever gain an unfair advantage from a rule set. And we can just play with the best of our ability. I'm going to declare my intent with what I'm doing so you know exactly what I'm trying to achieve. And if you can help me achieve that, and then you do the same with me, I can help you also achieve what you're trying to intend as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the rules are there to guide us, but sometimes you've got to take things with a little bit of a pinch of salt, a little bit of a... sometimes you've got to not read things the way you want to read them and actually put yourself in your opponent's shoes sometimes to go, hang on a minute, is this gaining me an unfair advantage? Because I probably don't want to do that if it is, because I'm not going to feel that sense of reward by scoring well on the mission if I'm just going to gain an easy ride to that to that end result.
Mhm. Mhm.
So things like, for example, I'll give you an experience that I had. Played against this one individual, and it wasn't a bad game, anything like that. And basically, I had placed my model within 3 of a character, and I did not declare my intent to stay out of his heroic intervention range.
Mhm.
Okay, I thought I was outside of 3, but I didn't say it. I just thought I was outside of 3, and he then heroically intervened into me.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, really sorry. I should have declared my intent on that. Anyway, it is what it is. And then something else happened. And then what I did, because he didn't declare his intent to base me, which he didn't do, he didn't base me, I then could consolidate towards the closest enemy model away from that character and just get outside of an inch and then pile in somewhere else. So I could pile in towards another model. And now all of a sudden I've been able to move away from that character that he heroically intervened with me.
Mhm.
And then he said to me, oh, it was my intent to base you there. Now I looked at him and I thought, well, A, you might not know that I could have done that. B, you might not know about that rule that if you base me, then I cannot pile in.
Mhm.
But I'm actually going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I let him do it. I said, okay, cool. Then I will let you base me there, as it were.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes you've just got to think, do I want the game to go like that? No, not really. I'd rather have a friendlier game and just go, if you meant to base me, no problem. That's cool with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing too, if you declare your intent like that, is, well, it's my intent to stay out of heroic intervention range, right? Well, my characters can heroically intervene 6 inches or whatever it is, right? Now it's the cooperative experience where they're helping you achieve that. Whereas if you didn't declare that, even if you stayed outside of 3 inches, you're still going to get heroically intervened. Um, Learning
Yes.
to play with intention is sometimes hard for new players, like to actually declare what they want to do. um I think sometimes, like for me, I feel like it sometimes opens me up to like feelings of criticism sometimes, when I'm like, oh
Okay.
well, this is my intention to do this, and then will people be like, well, why do you want to do that? Quite often that's what happens. Do you have any tips for like learning to play by intent, or like learning to declare what you want to do on the table?
So if you're a new player and you know you're playing against somebody a bit more experienced, the best thing you can say is, look, I'd love your feedback at the end of this game on how I could have done things differently.
Hmm.
But I'd love to learn from my mistakes today.
Hmm.
I'd love to play against you, make my mistakes so I can learn from them. If you're able to help me at the end identify which decisions I made were mistakes. You're only ever going to be able to develop as a player if you can sit back and think critically about, that was where I made that mistake. It's the things that it's when I'm in the gym, when I'm training, the things that make me stronger are the things that I can't lift, because I'm going to find workaround. I need to understand why I can't do that exercise, why I can't lift that weight, and I need to now find a workaround for it. But if I just go through life thinking, well, oh, I should have lifted that. Oh, I just had a bad day. Oh, I had a bad night's sleep, or whatever it was, without actually thinking, well, how do I get a good night's sleep?
Hmm.
Once you become accountable and responsible for your actions, your play is going to improve massively. And I think it's a beginner, just say, look, if you can give me some feedback at the end, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
that.
would then
Oh, I just
go
think
on.
like at the end is like, is the important part. I find that I get really overwhelmed in the moment. Like I'm trying to move my models, I'm trying to remember all of my stratagems and my rules and like all of this, and then on top of that to be like bombarded with all of the extra things that I could be doing or should be doing, or all that in the moment. I find that gets really overwhelming for me. Um but yeah, I feel like I could probably ask people to sort of help me out afterwards. That seems pretty reasonable.
It just means, for example, especially if you're beginning, rules is written, like you shouldn't remove a model that you've moved, right? But how often do you just move a model into the wrong position? You think, oh, I don't really want it there. Now I've seen the firing lane from that angle. I don't want it there. I'd rather go over there. Now, if you were to say to me, Steve, do you mind if I move my model back to where it was? And I'll be like, yeah, no problem. Like, do it this time, but next time, just pop a dice down where his position is. Then you can move it back to there before you move it again. So the first time, I'm going to give you benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, yeah, Tanya, just move it back to where you think it was. It's roughly there, right? And you're going to be like, yeah, cool. I know the worst you could gain is an inch, pretty much, right? The worst you gain is 2 inches. By moving it back, maybe not quite far enough, or slightly to the left, slightly to the right. Is it game breaking? No, it's not game breaking at all. So the first time I'm going to say, yeah, do it, put it back, move it to where you want to. And then after that, I'll say, for example, if you're playing knights and you've only got 5-6 models, just pop a dice either side of where that model is, and you could just move it back every time. So then the second time I'll remind you, hey, remember Tanya, put the dice down where he is now, and then you can move back to that position anytime you want and move from there. And then that way you think, actually, that's cool. I don't feel like I'm under pressure. As soon as I take my hand off this model that I need to leave it there. Again, I want you to feel completely relaxed. I want you to have a good time playing this game and knowing that you can also take as long as you want to make those decisions.
So, what do we do if we've asked for all of these things and we're finding that our opponent on the other side of the table is maybe not as interested in facilitating our learning process or for facilitating our game? How do we deal with that?
So I think, again, it comes down to that prior initial conversation. Okay. So if we had that conversation in the beginning and you say to me, I want to play rules as written, a real tight game, Steve, I'm going to be thinking, okay, bloody hell. Yeah, I'm going to have to make sure I play a really tight game, and I'm going to have to play exactly rules as written. So then if you were to ask me for go backs and all those different elements, I'd be thinking, hang on a minute, you asked me for a really tight rules as written game, and now you're changing the paradigm of how we decided to play this, because in my turn before, I didn't feel like I could ask for a go back or move my model slightly to the left or disembark out to the right or put my command aura on the unit to the left instead of the one to the right or whatever it might be. Because I felt like I had to play a really tight game for you. So again, I think it always comes back to that initial conversation. And if you are new, just say, hey, look, Steve, I don't care who wins this game. All I want is a really good fun time. I want to learn loads about the game. And all I want to try and is the best general win. I know I've got like a like-minded friend that I'm going to help out right from the get-go. I don't think there are, there might be one person I could probably think of that I know out of all the hundreds of games I've played, where if you'd have said, "Hey, Steve, I'm new to the game," they're thinking, "Great,
Oh
I'm going to take advantage of
no.
this person." It's they don't really exist,
No.
right? Like this is we always worry more about things than actually the reality itself.
In my experience, because in my limited experience, I will say, whenever I have gone to a table, even at a tournament, and was like, look, I am new at this game. I'm just hoping to learn some stuff, and like, if you see me doing wrong stuff, like, make sure that you help me out with that. I've never once ever felt like anybody was taking advantage of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's you've got such a great attitude for the game, and you just need to share that with your opponent as soon as you get to the table. And I think that really helps underline how the rest of that 3 hours is going to go. Again, I'm going to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, so okay, this is my intent. We're going to communicate well. We're going to keep those lines of communication open throughout this entire game. And I'm going to also let you know, if you feel uncomfortable at any time, you just tell me, okay? If you think I moved a little bit too far, just tell me and I'll just move it back a bit. It's not a problem. Like I said, we all get excited about these things. If you ever feel like as well, something sounds a little bit too good to be true, just say, hey, do you mind if we check your codex? I'd love to see that.
I do
That's a
have
really good way.
I do have
Go on.
one friend who just gets really, really excited when he gets a new codex and like skims it. Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, that's so good," but he doesn't like actually like read it. So quite often he'll like do things like that. And you're like, "That's way too good," right? So then we sit down together and sort of like dissect what the rule is actually saying, and I don't think that he means like any malicious intent about it whatsoever, and we have a really good laugh about it. Um,
Yep.
but yeah,
But
asking to see the rules is 100% an okay thing to do.
yeah, you just say, "Hey, do you mind? Oh, that sounds really good. Do you mind if we give that a read together?" And so this is a great way, right? Because you've phrased that in such a nice, polite way. If your opponent starts to get really shifty with you, then there's an alarm bell that potentially they are intentionally doing this on purpose. If they go, "Yeah, sure, no problem. Here it is. Here's the rule," and you read it together, and you go, "Oh, did you read the second line where it says you cannot do that on a vehicle unit, right?"
Hmm.
And they might have gone, "Oh, yeah, actually, that doesn't work, does it?" And you go, "Hey, don't worry about it. We all get things wrong. That is
Yeah.
either their action showed you, hey, no, here it is. It's this page. I'm like, I'm trying to help you see this cool rule that I think I have." And like when we read things, we fill in the blanks. We fill in the bits we don't want to read. Like I'm dyslexic, so I do that all the time anyway. But we just kind of want to like think, "Oh, that's a really cool stratagem. Yeah, I want to get stuck in with that because it's a cool game. We shoot lasers and weird swords and stuff. So we want these cool abilities, but yeah, sometimes you got to be, hang on a minute. How do I read this from an opponent's perspective? Is that fair? Okay, maybe it's not. Maybe I won't do that then. Like as soon as I saw the thing about the apothecaries being able to bring back ATVs before the FAQ, I just said to the guys on my channel, I was like, look, I said to all my students, don't do it. It's not cool. Bringing back is clearly not intended that you can bring back an ATV. Lo
Hmm.
and behold, a month later it gets FAQ'd
Yeah.
because it's broken. Like you just go,
Yeah.
actually, is this gaining me an unfair advantage? Yeah, I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like I've had it in the past where we knew that, for example, tournaments, right? So in a tournament, there's a rules cutoff period. Yeah.
Usually, yep.
So it's like a week, 2 weeks before. But if an FAQ drops in between that rule submission and then the list, don't just go, "Oh, one last hurrah for my broken units." No, just email the TO and go, "Look, do you mind if I change my list because clearly my army's broken and I don't want to bring that."
Hmm. Yeah.
Because you have to. And then normally a TO would go, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Just bring a different list,"
Hmm.
because we know that list is breaking the game, right? So
Hmm.
it's super like again, we always want to bring it back to, are we gaining an unfair advantage? But you have to be completely comfortable just to say, "Hey, do you mind if we check that?" Or "Do you mind if we just ask that person next to us if you can see, that line of sight, just so we've got somebody impartial? Or do you
Hmm.
mind if we get a TO just to see how they want us to play this rule?" And then me as your opponent, I'll be like, "Absolutely, please go and ask a TO. I want to make sure you feel comfortable 100% of the time while we're playing. I don't want you to feel under pressure. I don't want you to feel like you can't challenge me on anything." Because challenge is healthy, right? We need to be able to challenge us and each other to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to play the game in the best way we possibly can.
Hmm. Hmm. So, if we are that person who maybe is looking at it like I need to beat the person on the other side of the table instead of instead of the mission, and we're maybe gaming the system a little
Yep.
bit too hard, um, do you have any tips for people who might want to for people who recognize that and want to change?
Well, I think the first thing is recognizing
Hmm.
that you have that. Um, so, for example, I played an individual, and this is kind of my first ever YouTube video. I played this individual and had a really bad experience at the table against them. They slow played me, and there was a few weird and wonderful things that were going on at the table that at the time I was very new to the game and I was a little bit unsure as to the best, procedure to go ahead with. And I just wrote that game off. And then I stumbled into this person a few more times. I was at an event and this person come up to me. And bear in mind, I knew that they'd already had 3 difficult games that day with 3 other opponents that were my friends, that they reported back to me that they all had 3 bad games against this one individual. And this individual said to me, Steve, I never slow played you, just so you know. And I was like, right, insert person's name here. How many bad games have you had today? And he was like, 1 to 2. I said, well, I'm going to tell you how many bad games I've had. I've had 1 ever, and that was against you. I said, there's a common theme going on here. I said, you need to be held accountable. You need to hold yourself accountable and recognize the fact that, this individual spilt their pint 3 times in a game on the table so that he could move models all of a sudden in cover that weren't in cover before. And one of the guys told me about it. They got caught on stream for doing things they shouldn't be doing, and this person failed to recognize the fact that they have an issue with trying to win too hard. And then I played this person again at the LGT, and I swore that if I ever played them, if I ever matched them, I would refuse to play and I would instantly just give them the win, because I wouldn't want to spend 3 hours playing this individual. And then I was messaged by the TO, and they said, I don't want you to forfeit this game, because I already made a public statement that if I ever played this individual again, that I'd never play them. And I'll take the loss. I'd much rather take a loss, sit in a corner, than have to play this person.
Yeah.
So anyway, they asked me, we'll give you a referee for the entire game. And there's a video, it's on my YouTube channel, and I filmed it really raw. Like, I didn't edit it. I just filmed, and it's a bit longer than it should be. I took a bit longer to get to the point than I probably could have done. And anyway, this person argued with the referee all the way through the game. And at the start, I said to him, look, water under the bridge. Bygones be bygones, whatever. Let's have a good, clean, fun game. Start of the turn, he moves out all his models from his tank that he had in transports, and then says, oh, actually, can I move them somewhere else? And I went, I'll let you have it. And I could have, knowing previous experience from him, just said, no, you would never give me that same courtesy. But I said, do you know what? I'll be the bigger person here. Yeah, have it. Go on, do it. It's on your time if you need to remove it. So anyway, spent all game arguing with the referee, and it was getting really embarrassing. And I made this video about it, and he ended up getting a yellow card in the end after I complained and somebody else complained about his conduct. And then from that point onwards, just basically called me a liar every time somebody asked him about this interaction. Steve was lying. He made it up for YouTube views. I mean, I had no clue that it was going to go viral. No clue. It's not like I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll make this video and it'll go viral, and I'll get a little bit of money off YouTube for advertising
$5.
costs.
Like, YouTube advertising, stupid.
I'll tell you what, I'll buy myself a coffee, yeah? Anyway, so the fails to recognize the fact that it needs to change. So number one is actually think, did I deserve to win that game based on my ability as a player versus my over zealousness or whatever to cheat and get me through this? And that's the first thing, is recognizing the fact that you want to win because you are, like, I play this game to solve big puzzles, right? I want to be able to solve puzzles quicker than anybody else. That's like, and I want to be able to do that better than I've done that before, right? So that's my motivation, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like I can, and I'm gaining an unfair advantage, that goes against the reason why I'm playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing that you need to do is recognize the fact that you need to change, and then look at the behaviors that you're inherently doing and coming up with strategies to improve those ways. So, for example, the individual that I played had a habit of rolling dice behind terrain and then picking out, oh, rolled a 6. And somebody across from the next table went, you didn't roll that dice, you rolled the one next to it.
Ooh.
So the best thing you can do is go, look, hey, do you mind if we share a dice tray? It's in the middle. You can see it. I can see it. Cool. You've just solved that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're only ever going to get comfortable doing something by constantly doing it. So if you're uncomfortable playing to the rules as best as you possibly can, then the best thing you can do to get good at it is to come up with strategies that force you to do it. That's how you break habits. In order to make a new habit become embedded, you need to constantly do it and be motivated to change, and also be willing to go through those hard elements. So actually, once you're on the other side of it, it becomes a habit, although motivation might be low. So again, I've got a problem with rolling dice behind terrain. Cool, let's share a dice tray. That solves that problem straight away.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a habit, or if I'm constantly over moving models to the point where my opponents told me more than once that I'm over moving models, do you know what? Every time it says 6 on my data sheet, I'm going to assume it's 5. Because if I move 5 inches with a little bit extra, I'm still under 6.
Yep.
So there's all these little things that you can start to do to just try and help you. If I'm getting to tournaments and I'm forgetting my codex so that my opponent, when they challenge me about my rules, and I'm like, oh, I don't have it, mate. It's left it at home, didn't I? And my opponent's too worried potentially to ask a TO. Just say, look, I've got my codex here. All of my stratagems are laid out. I've put some post-it notes to each of the relevant pages that I'm using. I've got a cheat sheet here with all my stats on of all my things. I've written down what psychers have what powers, so I'm not accidentally moving powers across on Grey Knights. Oh, no, that's that unit with this, and oh, that's this unit that has that, or this is actually the sergeant in the squad. No, the sergeant's clearly identified because he's got a squad marking that I took the time to paint. So you can do these things to go, where am I cheating intentionally? Where am I going, oh, actually, no, that's the sergeant where it's convenient, or no, he needs to be over here now, and this sergeant's just transporting himself around the unit, or my psycho power that I really need, that Gate of Infinity happens to be now on every single squad, but earlier it wasn't. So do things to make it easy for you so that you are playing within guidelines.
I like
but
that.
you have to take action. You have to take action. Okay. And I think if you're playing somebody that is doing these things, just go, hey, do you mind, just before we move on, give them the benefit of the doubt the first time. But when all of a sudden Gate is appearing from a different squad, just so, hey, do you mind if we go through all of your units that are left on the table, and just, here's a piece of paper, tear it up, just write all your powers down next to that squad, which unit has what powers. Yeah. And then you can play from there.
Yeah. I think for me, as somebody who I'm not working through this particular behavioral problem, but I'm working through other behavioral problems. I think that you really have to be vulnerable with the people around you and ask the people around you to hold you accountable to your plan of action to change. If you don't have people around you who are going to be that you're going to be able to go to in order to ask for that I think, especially in a game that requires 2 people to play, that might be a red flag that this has been going on for a while. If you do have somebody to ask to hold you accountable, you need to be extremely vulnerable with them and sort of get everything off of your chest with them. But yes, being vulnerable and accountability buddies is very important.
Just say, look, is there anything I do when we play that upsets you or makes you feel uncomfortable? And if they say no, I love it. Cool. We carry on. So for example, like the other day, I had I was talking to somebody online, and they'd commented on the fact that I'd move terrain when we were playing, when me and Joe play. So on stream, me and Joe play a different army every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, we are going to get rules wrong. When we're playing on stream, it's a new army every week. We're going to get things wrong. Probably more often than we would. Well, especially more often than we would if we were going to a tournament, because we'd have had 10 to 20 repetitions in with that list. I'll have a cheat sheet with me. I'll know those rules. I'll be reciting those rules in the car on the way there. I'll be reading that codex the night before. I'll be doing absolutely everything I can to make sure that is watertight. Unfortunately, I don't get that luxury to do that every Tuesday. And on a Monday, we're like, what game are we going to play tomorrow on stream? And it's, oh, what models haven't we used in a while? Or it's, that's a really bad matchup. I'll just play something else quickly so we can show a quick, fast, fun game. Somebody said, oh, you're cheating, you moved terrain. I said, what terrain did I move it? And I remembered, I watched the video back. I moved a tree just to make sure I could keep coherency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, trees are really annoying they're really awkward to actually play around.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm using Harlequins, right? So they're not going to care if a tree branch is sticking. They're probably going to be stood on said tree branch while they're smacking you in the face.
Yeah.
So me moving that tree to make sure I can keep coherency, I just said to Joe, oh, do you mind if I move this tree? He's like, yeah, move it. Like, we're just getting it out of the way so we can play quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the tree goes back to where it goes for when it matters, i.e. when we're worrying if it's, being dense terrain or not.
Mm-hmm.
And later on in the game, Joe wanted to move a model onto a pipe. I said, I'll just move the pipe out of the way because it's a pretty piece of terrain that isn't functionally affecting the game. And it comes back to, am I gaining an unfair advantage? No. Is Joe gaining an unfair advantage? No. So does it matter? No.
Yeah.
We're just speeding things along quickly.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to move my model out the way because I don't want to ram it down exactly like we both agreed my model could fit in a certain place. I'll be like, oh, Joe, do you mind if I just, say my model's there? Because what I know is going to happen, if I move my big base down, I'm going to snap off all the little spiky things he's got in his models, right?
Yeah.
Or can I quickly move your models to place my model there? Because my intent is to wrap you. If you've got the movement too, yeah, cool, do it. That's not a problem. Did you roll high enough on your charge? Yeah, you did. Cool.
It comes down to that pregame talk too, right? If because of the sort of global situation right now, there's a lot of people coming into the hobby who have not had any experience playing. And a lot of them are turning to battle reports in order to experience how the game works. But I have a very similar experience from when I played actually your sponsored game at Play on Tabletop. We were playing sort of vehicle heavy lists, right? And there was a group of tents on the battlefield, and we actually had our pregame talk, and our pregame talk included, well, they're just tents. So if we drive over them, or if my Bulgarins or your superhuman genetically engineered soldiers want to just walk over the tents, for the game, for the purpose of the game, those tents don't exist. They're just there to be pretty, right? But because they don't show that pregame talk on a battle report, I think that there's a whole generation of people who are coming into the game that don't know that this happens. And there were so many comments on that video about us cheating because we just took the tents off, right? Never mind that there's like 3 big vehicles like converging over these tents. But yeah, the pregame talk is a huge deal, and I'm so glad that we could actually sort of dive into it and dive into like the mechanics of how it works.
Yeah, and then again, it's just once you've had that conversation, you know which things matter and which things don't. So which things can you just speed along a bit? Because at the end of the day, you're playing at a tournament, you're under a time frame, you're under a time crunch, and you need to get things moved along quickly. And this is where, declaring your intent, hey, I've just worked it out that if I roll this with a 3-inch pile in and a 3-inch consolidation, I can wrap your vehicle. What I'm going to do is charge, not get within an inch, but not get any closer, and then I can pile in closer to that enemy model, and I've got enough distance to keep my coherency so I can completely wrap that vehicle. So if I roll this on the charge, i.e. an 8, when I kill you, all your models are inside that are going to die. If I don't roll an 8, you can get your models out at the back. Agreed? Yeah, no problem. What do I roll? A 5. Yeah, no problem. I'll just move them forward, push them around a bit. Okay, cool. Yeah, just get your models out at the back. Because it didn't matter. Okay. And I think that's really crucial when you're under a time crunch, is that you can have those dialogues. Or when somebody says to me, oh, Steve, I'm going to put this unit of aggressors with 100 shots, or whatever they get, into this 2-man unit, I'll just pick them up, mate. Just let's move it along. Let's not, I'm not going to go, oh, I tell you what, you can roll those out with all the re-rolls, and I'm going to watch your time go down. Like, no, I'm just going to pick them up, mate. Just move them off the table. Let's move this along.
Yeah.
Or if that one time I'm like, okay, I've got a character here with a 3+ invulnerable save. I could, if this goes really well for me, maybe it's game changing.
Yeah.
That's a little bit different. But I think you get a limited amount of those, those moments where you say, oh, do you mind just, rolling that out for me? Or do you mind if you just double check that movement? So sometimes I'll say with Joe, when we're playing on stream, I'll be like, Joe, this is really important. I'm setting up to be over X amount away inches from you. So I'll declare, hey, I'm outside of your threat range. So I'll say, Joe, how far does that unit move? And he'll go, 7. Can you advance in charge? He'll be like, no. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stay over 19 inches away so you cannot charge me. Okay, cool. We've agreed that. We love it. Even if Joe accidentally moves his model 7.5 inches, he can't now make a 12-inch charge because we've agreed that I've measured it out and I'm behind 19 inches away. And I think you just need to have that knowledge of going, actually, do you mind just measuring that out for me quickly? Just to make sure that we're, you can do what you're trying to do based on my intent of earlier. And I think that's really important. Just to articulate that. And I'll be like, yeah, no problem. Help me do it. Move that piece of terrain. Let's get flat to the table. Let's not, because sometimes when you're measuring over angles, like it's not TTS. Like
even TTS has issues.
I mean, players that are just used to TTS, guess what? You're not going to have all those guide ropes when you play. It's going to get real. You're going to have to scoop down low and see if you've got line of sight. You're going to have to move terrain. You're going to have to, move models so you can exactly measure if it becomes precise enough. But just like I said earlier, play with a little bit of immersion sometimes. Moving a tree, the Harlequin would be stood on the tree. He's not going to care about, he's going to be running along that pipe to get in combat with you. Just as long as it's not an issue, like you said about those tents, like immersively, those vehicles just, mow down those tents, right? 40k is an abstract game. We need to remember that. It's not touch piece, move piece necessarily, and my model just stops here and it's not a black and white game like that. The reason why we love it so much is because it is so immersive, and it needs to be a little bit flexible too. And you're going to have the best games if you play like that, I promise.
Awesome. I think that is the perfect place to end this one. Do you have any final thoughts?
No. I think we've covered so much pre-game talk, but be brave, be bold, and get out there and play at tournaments.
They're so fun.
Don't be, it's gonna be uncomfortable sometimes, and that's okay. You're only gonna get comfortable with everything by sometimes being uncomfortable.
It's true. I couldn't agree more. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Vanguard Tactics on YouTube. If you want to check out our academy, then that is at www.vanguardtactics.com, where if you just want to get a little bit more confidence, build, get that clarity that you probably need, because we all do sometimes with the game, and understanding where we're at and how to improve, then the academy's perfect. So all we try and help is people to be a little bit more composed when they play. And that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not trying to make world champions. All I'm trying to help people do is be consistent and go to a tournament and know that they've got a good chance of doing okay. That's it.
That's amazing.
Me in a nutshell.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think I'm probably going to ask you to come back if you come back.
I'd love to. Thank you much for having me.
Awesome. All right, folks. Comment down below to tell me all about your stories of dealing with that guy, or give me any tips that you think we might have missed here. I know I sure learned a lot in this episode, but you can always teach me more. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. I paint on Twitch on Saturdays. I do the Just Put Paint On It hobby stream with Scarredcast Tuesday through Friday. I have an Instagram where I post all of my hobby and I muse on life. And I'm on Forge the Narrative podcast. And until next time, everybody, be nice and roll dice.